It's nighttime, and a bunch of crows are flying around in the dark sky. A carriage creaks along the winding road, carrying two people, a man and a young girl named Areum. The man sits back comfortably, watching Areum with tired eyes, while she shivers in her seat, on the verge of tears. When the carriage finally stops in front of a huge mansion, a maid steps out to fetch Areum. She hurries her along the dark hallways of the mansion, and they soon stop in front of a heavy door. The maid tells her to go in, and Areum hesitates for a moment, feeling scared and unsure. Before she can react, the maid shoves her into the room and the door slams shut behind her. She lands on her face, and this time, tears start streaming down her cheeks because she's afraid. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the mansion, the man from the carriage bows to the master of the house, telling him that everything has been taken care of. The master nods and says he'll come by soon to check things out for himself. Back in the cold, dark room, Areum feels completely alone and terrified, convinced that her life is about to end. Memories rush through her mind, flashing back to her normal life before everything went wrong. In a flashback, we see Areum walking to school just like any other day. She sees a bunch of people crossing the road and quickly hurries to join them. When she reaches the edge of the sidewalk, she doesn't notice the pedestrian crossing light has turned red, so she steps onto the road, and a truck runs her over. Moments later, Areum opens her eyes to find a crowd gathered around her, staring down. Some people look excited, others seem worried, and she can hear them whispering words like vampire and it. Confused, Areum tries to make sense of it all. One man steps forward, dramatically apologizing to the crowd for causing a fuss. And then he boldly claims that Areum is a vampire slave. Baffled by his accusation, Areum asks him what he's talking about, but he ignores her completely. Instead, he grabs her roughly, and before she knows it, she's locked up in a large cage. She can't help but wonder if she has somehow found herself in the depths of hell. After what feels like an eternity, Areum is pulled onto a stage in a dark underground auction. People bid on her like she's a mere object, and she is utterly shocked when she's sold for a staggering 130,000 pieces of gold. She gets dragged along with a chain, feeling lost and terrified. In the carriage, Areum pleads with her companion to let her go, insisting that she isn't a slave or a vampire. He coldly tells her to shut up, warning her that he'll muzzle her if she doesn't obey. After a long, tense silence, he finally speaks again, informing Areum that she'll meet Lord Millard soon. He bluntly warns her that if Lord Millard doesn't like her, she'll be taken away, as a corpse. The man advises her to win Lord Millard's favor if she wants to live. He concludes with a chilling reminder that living is always a better option, and now Areum knows she must find a way to make Lord Millard like her if she hopes to survive this nightmare. Back to the present. The door creaks open and Areum looks towards it with dread. Lord Millard stands at the entrance, his gaze taking in the room and its occupant. The first thing he does is ask Areum why she's crouched in the corner, and her heart races as she realizes that he's the master of the house. He crouches before Areum, taking her face in his hands, and she racks her brain, thinking of a way to gain his favor so that her life would be spared. He retreats to a couch in the room, beckoning her forward, and she hesitantly approaches, reminding herself that he is a vampire. She recalls her carriage companion telling her that the master drinks blood for his meals. Lord Millard asks Areum if she can speak, and she hurries to answer affirmatively for fear of displeasing him. He is relieved that she can speak because he had already been considering other options to get her to reply to him. Finally, he goes straight to the point. He asks Areum if she's a vampire, and she replies that she is not, though the question has also been on her mind. Lord Millard is in disbelief. He points out that Areum has black hair and blood-soiled clothes. He finds it difficult to believe that she's not a vampire, but Areum insists that she isn't, leaning back in fear. Lord Millard leans forward and grabs her face. He informs her that he bought her because they said she was a vampire. He pulls open her mouth, and he tells her that her fangs are blunt because they are normal human teeth. He takes in her appearance from different angles, trying to inspect for some form of deceit. Finally, he leans back on the couch in disbelief. He says he's speechless because he spent 130,000 pieces of gold to buy a human. Once again, he beckons Areum forward, and she obeys, fearing for her life. Lord Millard takes her hand and bites down on it. She looks at him, totally confused. He starts sucking on her hand and swallows. Then his eyes widens in surprise, and he violently shoves her away. He turns away, spitting and coughing, while Areum just stands there, not sure what's happening. When he finally turns to her, he says he has never had such disgusting blood before that it almost makes him want to throw up. It shocks Areum because she didn't even know he had been drinking her blood. Fear washes over her. She starts to shake because she worries Lord Millard might decide to end her life just because her blood is gross. He tells her that if her blood tastes this bad, then she can't be human. And if she's not a vampire, what then is she? Areum starts crying, insisting that she is a human. She's frantic, thinking hard to come up with a way to escape this terrifying situation. After he calms down, Lord Millard asks Areum what he should do with her. Panic sets in, and she drops to the ground, terrified of losing her life. She knows she has to say something, anything, to convince him. Finally, she looks up and tells him that she is very responsible. Then she begins rambling about her qualities. She mentions how she always ranks in the top 3 in tests, her love for reading, which makes her great at understanding things, and how good she is at chores. Lord Millard looks at her, curious about how all this information helps her case. Then Areum falls flat on her face, begging to serve him well. She reminds him that he paid a whopping 130,000 pieces of gold to buy her, so she is technically his servant now. He nods, acknowledging that he indeed spent a huge amount of money on her, but he wonders if she's actually worth it. Then an idea strikes him. He tells Areum that he could just sell her again for profit, sending her back to the auction. Areum remembers how awful her experience was at the auction, feeling like an animal on display for sale, and she starts pleading with Lord Millard to show her mercy. She promises to be an excellent cleaner and do all the laundry without any issues. He just smiles at her mockingly, asking if she really wants to live that badly. Then he reminds her that he doesn't even need her. Angry that her chances are slipping away from her, Areum stands up and faces him furiously. She tells him to go ahead and sell her if that's what he wants. She threatens to let everyone know that he hates her blood, suggesting they could use it for all sorts of things like poison or medicine, and that whoever buys her would actually have something valuable. Given that he's a vampire and also the Duke, a lot of people would be interested. Lord Millard's expression changes. He looks at Areum coldly and asks if she's finished ranting. Then he adds that it might just be better to get rid of her altogether and forget about the money. Areum drops to her knees again, begging him to spare her life. She grovels, pleading for him to let her live. Lord Millard smirks, asking her why she's so desperate to survive. She insists that she will serve him well and do anything he wants. He chuckles, saying it's been a while since he met a human who has zero self-respect, and he seems to find it amusing. Finally, he turns his back to her, declaring that he can always kick her out if she becomes useless. Areum breathes a sigh of relief, feeling grateful that she's managed to escape being unalived, for now. The maid from earlier comes to fetch her and asks for her name. Areum states her name, and the maid asks her if she is a human. She informs the maid that she is human, and she proceeds to add that there are many humans with black hair where she comes from. The maid thinks to herself that Areum must really come from a strange place. Then she shows her to a clean room, and Areum thanks her. Once she lays down, everything she had held back ever since her accident comes crashing down on her. Her injured pride, how pathetically she had begged for her life, how she's been taken away from her normal life, etc. She cries profusely as she calls out for her mother until she falls asleep. After leaving Areum's room, the maid goes to see a man that night, who she addresses as Philip. She informs him about the new maid, and Philip, in reply, addresses her as Solène. He tells her that he wasn't informed about the new maid, and Solène reveals that it was the decision of Lord Millard who had instructed that the new maid be put to work starting tomorrow. Mr. Philip points out that Solène didn't bring the new maid along, and she replies that it was impossible to. She tells Philip Areum's name, and he agrees that it is indeed an unusual name. With a serious expression, Solène asks Philip to prepare Areum's coif before noon the next day because the girl mustn't be allowed to walk around the mansion with her hair. The next day, Solène wakes Areum up and tells her to make her bed. Areum quickly gets up and does as she's asked. After she's finished, Solène hands her a uniform and emphasizes that she must always wear the coif because her hair color might make people think she's a vampire. Areum can't help but wonder why so many people are working in the mansion if they dislike vampires so much. As she steps out with Solène, the older woman reminds her not to ask questions or be curious about things. Solène warns Areum that if she can't follow these basic rules, she might lose her job. They stop in front of a room, and Solène announces that they're there to see Lord Millard. He asks Areum to come inside, and Solène gives her one last look before leaving. Areum walks into the room and asks Lord Millard what her first task is. He points to an unfinished puzzle on his desk and tells her to find the missing piece. She forces a smile, determined to do a good job, and sets to work. After looking around for a while, she spots the missing piece under the bed. She picks it up and brings it to her master, explaining where she found it. To her surprise, he flicks the tiny piece out of her hand and tells her to take his books back to his study. Areum keeps forcing a smile until she steps outside, secretly calling Lord Millard a jerk in her mind as she walks away, feeling frustrated and unsure of where the study is. As she wanders around the mansion for a bit, she decides to ask some of the other maids for directions to the study. However, they seem to avoid her, whispering to each other when she approaches. After several unsuccessful tries to find the study on her own, Areum decides it's best to just go back to Lord Millard and ask him directly. She takes a deep breath, announces her presence, and opens the door to his room. Just as she steps inside, something sharp whizzes past her face and embeds itself into the wall behind her. It's a blade. Lord Millard jumps up from his bed and slams his hand against the wall. Areum drops the books she is carrying, and she looks up at him in fear. He glares at her and demands to know why she entered his room without permission. Areum rushes to plead for her life, asking Lord Millard to forgive her while apologizing. Her mind races as she thinks of how to calm him down. She slowly raises her hands to hold his, which are on either side of her face. As she keeps apologizing and promises not to make the same mistake again, she gently pulls his hands away from the wall and squeezes them. This unexpected gesture makes Lord Millard blush, and he quickly pulls his hands back, turning away in embarrassment. As Areum bends down to pick up the books that have fallen, Lord Millard asks if she didn't find the study. She replies that she couldn't find it. He then rings a bell in the room, and shortly after, a man named Logan comes in. Lord Millard tells Logan to show Areum around the house. The moment Areum locks eyes with Logan, she realizes he's the same person who sat beside her in the carriage when she first arrived at the mansion. Once they step out of the room, Logan tells Areum he's actually impressed that she managed to stay alive. She thanks him and says his advice really helped her. They head over to the study, and Logan encourages her to hurry as she puts away the books. After she finishes, he takes her on a little tour of the mansion. He shows her the office, guest room, dining room, and the big banquet hall. While they're exploring, Lady Solène suddenly shows up and asks to borrow Areum for a few minutes. Areum nods and follows her to the kitchen. She catches sight of the various delicacies spread out on the table, and she begins to drool. Lady Solène hands over a tray of snacks to her, adding that they are for Lord Millard. She instructs the younger girl to carry them carefully and follow her. As they walk up the stairs, Areum asks Lady Solène if Lord Millard eats food apart from blood, and Solène says she doesn't know because she has never seen him eat. Silently, Solène mutters that it's a pretense by Lord Millard to act like a human, but Areum doesn't hear her. As they continue walking, Areum secretly hopes that Lord Millard wouldn't be interested in the food because she's starved and hungry. They get to his office and carefully arrange the trays on his table. When they turn to leave, Lord Millard halts them. He asks Areum to stay, and Solène leaves. As she stands awkwardly at the door, Lord Millard tells her to sit anywhere. She takes a seat, and her stomach growls as she thinks about how hungry she is and how much she wants to eat. When Lord Millard raises his fork to take a bite of his cake, Areum asks him to wait, and he looks at her questioningly. She gets up with a big smile on her face and tells Lord Millard to give her the cake, saying it's only right that she tries it first for him. She adds that it might be poisoned, so she wants to taste it before him. After all, that's what personal maids are supposed to do, right? She rushes over to his side, getting down on her knees. Awkwardly, he shoves the piece of cake into her mouth, urging her to eat it and find out whether it's safe or not. Areum takes a big bite and chews happily. Her eyes light up as she savors how delicious the cake is. She looks up at Lord Millard, grinning, and says she's still not sure if it's poisoned, so she thinks she should have another bite just to be certain. He smirks and offers her another piece, which she accepts with pleasure and digs into. The sweetness fills her mouth, and she smiles even more. Finally, he tells her that once she finishes eating, she should do something about the stench of her blood. Areum stops for a moment, feeling confused. Stench? Lord Millard points at her ankle, and she takes off her shoe. To her surprise, she sees there's a wound there. He rings a bell, and soon Logan appears again. He asks Logan to take care of the wound on Areum's foot and to get her a new pair of shoes. Logan leads her to an empty room and says she should wait there for a bit while he finds someone to help her. The door creaks open, and a maid steps inside. She seems really cheerful to meet Areum, who is the new personal maid. With a smile, she introduces herself as Marin Marley and asks Areum for her name. Areum tells her name, and then Marin leans down to take a better look at Areum's face. She's curious about what Lord Millard sees in Areum that he likes so much. After a moment, Marin asks Areum how old she is, and Areum replies that she's 19. It turns out they are the same age. Suddenly, Marin's face changes. She looks at Areum and says that she's not pretty at all. Yet she's managed to become Lord Millard's personal maid. She glares down at Areum and tells her to know her place. Furthermore, she goes on to say that she's worked really hard for the past 2 years just to become Lord Millard's personal maid. So how could Areum just step in and take that away from her? Areum leans back uncomfortably, wondering if something is wrong with Marin. Just as quickly, Marin smiles again and says that no matter what, she will still take care of Areum's wound. After wrapping up Areum's ankle with bandages, Marin announces that she's finished. She waves goodbye and starts to walk away. Watching her leave, Areum sits exhausted, wondering if people in this world like vampires or not. Later, Lord Millard calls her into his office. He asks her to count how many times a specific word appears in a book. Areum looks worn out as she tries to recall where she stopped. She wonders why Lord Millard would make her do something like this. Feeling drained, she plops face down on the book and rubs her stinging eyes. After a while, she gets up and tells Lord Millard that she found them 68 times. He stares at her coldly, and she asks him if she counted it wrong. He has a flashback about being a child stuck in a cold, empty room with the same book, counting those same words. He takes the book from Areum and agrees with her that it is 1,068 times. He looks down at the book with a sad smile. On a beautiful day, Areum gets up in the room she shares with Lady Solène. As she tidies her bed, she's happy to have woken up early again. It's been almost a week since she arrived, and she's starting to feel at home in the mansion. She snacks on some toast for breakfast and watches longingly as a maid walks by with a plate of pasta and protein. As she goes about her day, she's glad she's gotten used to the vampire's temper. When she thinks about it, though, his temper has really been something else. Lord Millard often makes her do chores over and over again. Once, he asked her to bring him a fresh cup 20 times. Another time, he had her wipe down almost every book in his study. And every so often, he just throws something out the window and angrily tells her to go get it. Areum sighs. She realizes that her work is just a series of tasks that require her to deal with Lord Millard's mood. As she sees some maids cleaning a window, she thinks that maybe her job isn't so bad after all. In Lord Millard's room, he sits hunched over and looks upset. Areum asks him if he's feeling sick and if she should get a doctor because he seems exhausted. He scoffs at the mention of a doctor, and she asks if he has a fever or feels nauseous. She kneels beside him and continues her questions, asking if any part of him hurts. She pleads with him to tell her what's wrong because he looks pale. Lord Millard looks at her with a cold expression and asks why she is trying so hard. Areum gives a nervous smile and asks him what he means by his statement. But inside, she's thinking to herself that the only reason she is asking is that she's worried his temper might flare up. Outwardly, they both watch each other suspiciously. Finally, Lord Millard relaxes on his bed and he tells Areum that he's not sick. She sighs in relief and he asks her to tell Lady Solene to send someone to the Flora. Areum walks out of the room and sees some maids by the stairs whispering. It doesn't surprise her because she actually likes it when they steer clear of her. She hears one of them say that she's annoying and asking why she's even in the mansion. She turns around to talk to the maid. Smiling brightly, she asks the maid Priscilla if she knows where Lady Solene is. Priscilla crosses her arms in anger and tells Areum not to smile, saying it makes her feel sick. She reminds her that she shouldn't be on the first floor, and Areum turns away with a sarcastic reply, making Priscilla even angrier. Priscilla tries to grab Areum's coif, but she holds on to it, knowing that Priscilla would try that. Behind her, Priscilla is even more furious, and Areum sticks out her tongue. She finds Lady Solene and lets her know that Lord Millard asked her to send someone to the Flora. As Lady Solene walks out, she follows behind and asks what the Flora is and what goes on there. Lady Solene tells her it's not her business, and Areum steps back, surprised. She heads back to Lord Millard's room, knocks, and he tells her to come in. She informs him that she has passed his message to Lady Solene. However, she is still curious, so she asks Lord Millard what the Flora is. In reply, he says that a child like her doesn't need to know, and it frustrates her, making her wonder what exactly the Flora is. Later that night, Areum is working with Lord Millard in his office, and she's reading some details out loud from a book. She asks if she can get a drink of water, but he snaps at her and says no. In her head, she calls him a punk for being able to work non-stop without taking a break. Out loud, she tells him it's difficult to read properly with her voice cracking, but he doesn't even look up and says he prefers her to read with a completely raspy voice. She silently calls him a bastard, but she loudly tells him she'll try her best. A knock sounds at the door, and Lord Millard tells the person to come in. Lady Solene opens the door and says that what he wanted is ready. Lord Millard stands up, and they walk together in silence until they reach a spot where they stop, and Lady Solene pulls a curtain aside to reveal a secret door. Areum looks on in wonder and attempts to follow, but Lord Millard pokes her forehead. He tells her to wait until she's older to come in. Lady Solene turns to her and instructs her to fetch Isabel. When she finds Isabel, she notifies her that Lady Solene wants her on the second floor. And Isabel snaps back that she already knows. Areum wonders if she's the only one who doesn't know what the Flora is. Behind her, Marin bursts out laughing. She asks Areum how young Lord Millard must have viewed her if he felt the need to send her away. Areum replies heatedly that she wasn't kicked out, and Marin points out that it's evident because she's here speaking with her instead of helping Lord Millard as his personal maid. With a triumphant smirk, she calls Areum a loser, and this time around it really angers her to boiling point. Isabel returns and slams a bowl of water on the table. She tells Areum that Lady Solene requested for her and that she should hurry. Areum and Marin stare for a moment, surprised by Isabel's outbursts. She returns to Lady Solene, who asks why she's so late. Then she invites Areum in to help clean up, and Areum asks where Lord Millard is. Lady Solene replies that he already left. Inside the room, she sees a woman scantily dressed sitting on a bed. The woman greets Areum and says she hasn't seen her before. She asks Lady Solene if the new maid will be around from now on, and Lady Solene confirms that she will. The woman turns to Areum, saying she will be seeing her often, and introduces herself as Rose. Areum smiles and introduces herself too, but inside she thinks she has an idea of what kind of place this is. Rose asks Lady Solene what Lord Millard does with all his energy, since he seems to take a lot of blood. She wonders if he has found a woman to be his companion. Solene says she cannot discuss Lord Millard's personal life, and Rose says she needs the prize money to help Solene get a cut. Solene reminds Rose that Areum is listening, but Rose shrugs it off, saying everyone in Soltera knows. Areum watches them, feeling confused, and Rose turns to her, saying she looks naive. She asks if Areum is staying with a vampire without realizing anything, and Areum asks what she means. Rose laughs in absolute surprise. She says Areum is cute for being so clueless. Once she calms down, she tells Areum that she is talking about the decree, and Areum looks lost. What decree? Years ago, there was a decree that whoever becomes the vampire's companion and kills him would get the Travis family's title and estate. The instructions were straightforward. Find a mortal companion for the immortal vampire and make him mortal too. This means that anyone who can turn him into something that can be killed would get a massive reward. Areum feels bad after hearing this. She stands outside Lord Millard's room, unsure if she should go in or not. She thinks it's so unfair and wonders if Lord Millard thinks she's been nice to him just because of the decree. Areum tries to knock on the door but hesitates, thinking about what she should say. She practices a line, "I only found out about it today. I only had your interest." But then she realizes that everything she's done so far has been for herself, not for him. Feeling guilty, she decides to leave. Just then, the door swings open, and Lord Millard asks her what she's doing outside. She's surprised but quickly puts on a smile and asks him if he feels better. Lord Millard responds with a question, asking if she's really just there to check on him, and tells her to come inside. Areum declines and promises to return the next day, but then, under his insistence, she goes in and wonders what he will make her do this time. Lord Millard looks at her and asks why she's lying, since he knows she isn't there out of concern. Areum stammers that she's not lying, but he insists she is. He tells her it's obvious that her words don't match what she truly feels. He demands that she tells him the real reason for her visit. Areum looks down, not knowing what to say. Suddenly, Lord Millard's eyes turn red, and he commands her to share her thoughts. She looks up, locks eyes with him, and feels her mouth trying to open against her will. She suspects he's done something to her. Within moments, her eyes clear and she finds her voice, asking him why he wants to know so badly. He seems shocked and asks if she doesn't feel anything, and it confirms Areum's suspicion that he really did try something on her. She forces a smile and tells him it's because she wishes to serve him willingly. He gives her a cold stare, still not believing her. Areum realizes he won't let her go until she's honest. He pulls her hand and leads her to his bed, where he relaxes and insists she tell him the truth. Finally, she gives in and hesitantly says she heard about the decree from Rose and asks if he knows about it too. When he confirms he does, Areum's mouth starts moving again. She explains that she just found out about the decree today. He looks at her, puzzled about where this is going. Areum continues, saying she isn't staying by his side to get rid of him and score a win. She's not that kind of person. As she rambles on, Lord Millard suddenly bursts into laughter, leaving Areum confused. His laughter grows wilder as he finally understands her. He beckons her forward and pats her head inwardly. He thinks 130,000 pieces of gold was a reasonable price after all. As she gets her head patted, Areum thinks he looks handsome when he smiles. The next day, Areum is in Lord Millard's messy office, and they're working together. She asks him if he wants to see something cool, then proudly makes a paper crane. She tells him that where she's from, it's a myth that if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, your wish will come true. Lord Millard gets up and walks away, leaving Areum feeling disappointed because she thinks she didn't impress him. A little later, the door creaks open, and Logan walks in with a gigantic stack of papers. Lord Millard tells him to put it down on his desk. Areum can't believe what she sees and asks Lord Millard if he wants her to fold all those papers into paper cranes. He actually agrees, and even Logan feels a bit sorry for her. Looking at the gigantic pile, Areum realizes she's gotten herself into trouble. So she starts folding paper cranes on the floor with a determined look. After a while, she stops and stretches her tired shoulders. Lord Millard kneels next to her and picks up one of the cranes, inspecting it silently. Areum is surprised by this, but then he tells her to speed up, because she has only folded 203 so far. Areum urges him to get up, feeling uncomfortable with him sitting on the floor. He asks her why, and she explains that it would be embarrassing if someone walked in. Lord Millard reassures her that he won't feel embarrassed in front of humans whether he's sitting or lying on the floor. He picks up another paper crane and pokes at it. Areum suddenly thinks about asking him a question and hesitantly calls out to him. Meanwhile, Lady Solene is in the dining hall getting the table ready for Lord Millard's meal. Once she finishes, she knocks on his office door. When she's allowed in, she's greeted by an unbelievable sight. Lord Millard and Areum are sitting opposite each other with piles of paper beside them, and there's a big heap of perfectly folded paper cranes between them. Let's go back to some minutes ago. Remember when Areum had wanted to ask Lord Millard a question? Well, Areum asks him if he wants to fold paper cranes with her. He frowns and asks if she realizes who she is talking to. Even though he says this, he doesn't seem too offended. He's actually curious about how to fold the cranes. Areum tells him it would be faster if they worked together. She secretly wonders how long it would take to fold 1,000 cranes by herself. She tells Lord Millard to stop pulling at the wings and to pay attention. Then she teaches him how to fold a paper crane. He watches her with an annoyed look, thinking he doesn't have to listen to someone like her. But Areum is patient and kind in her teaching, and eventually, he gives in. On a sunny day, Areum sits in a chapel with several other worshippers. She's curious about why everyone is here. It's surprising to see a chapel in a vampire's house. She only came because Lady Solene had asked her to. A priest walks in, dressed all in white, and everyone gapes after him. He has gray hair and is tall. Areum can't help but follow him with her eyes, feeling like he's the most beautiful man she's ever seen. When he starts speaking, she hopes his sermon will be wonderful. However, a few moments later, she finds herself dozing off. The sermon turns out to be boring, and she feels disappointed that even the stunning priest can't make it interesting. She decides she won't judge people just by first impressions anymore. Finally, the priest finishes his sermon and pours water from a jug into a glowing bowl. Areum's interest peaks again as she wonders if it's magic. The priest invites the congregation to come up one by one, and Areum falls in line behind. Each person kneels as the priest blesses them, and Areum watches. She feels like the priest was born in light the moment he came into the world. He looks pure, benevolent, and affectionate, and Areum can feel his love for the people. She bitterly compares him to the scary Lord Millard, though they both have a habit of speaking too much. When it's Areum's turn, she steps forward, and the priest looks surprised for a moment before covering it up and blessing her. Areum notices, and she wonders if he thinks she's a vampire. She stands up and thanks him, and the priest says he has never seen her before. He introduces himself as Ezra Travis, the person in charge of the Travis family, and he says it's a pleasure to meet her. Areum introduces herself as well, and she notices a concerned look on his face. Ezra tells her he knows she must be going through a lot since she's been in the Duke's mansion for some time. He encourages her to reach out if she needs help. He even asks if she wants to share her story. Areum hesitates. She wonders why he's being so nice. She smiles and says she needs to go back to Master Millard. Ezra offers to walk her there, since he's headed that way too. At Lord Millard's office, he's lounging in a chair when he hears a knock. He tells the visitor to come in, and turns out it's two visitors, Ezra and Areum. Ezra greets Lord Millard, calling him Elder Millard, and gets straight to the point about not getting a response from him last time. Lord Millard gives him the side-eye and says he doesn't want him to come closer because he finds him annoying. Ezra leans in with a smile and says he thinks Millard is funny. He adds that the Imperial Majesty has requested him to attend an event. Lord Millard tells him that he's not going, and Ezra says he'll pretend he didn't hear him. Lord Millard frowns as he begins to fold paper cranes. He insists he's not going and looks back at Areum, asking her to come over and help him with folding paper cranes. She rushes to her seat, and for the first time, Ezra notices all the paper cranes on the table. He asks Millard if he made them all with Areum. Millard says yes, and Ezra curiously picks one up, poking and pulling at it. Areum sees the wonderment on his face and considers asking him to join their crane folding. Suddenly, Lord Millard announces he will attend the event and tells Ezra to inform the Imperial Majesty. Both Ezra and Areum look at him in surprise, and Ezra's face lights up with excitement. He claps his hands in delight at Millard's sudden change of heart. Ezra notifies Lord Millard that the event is happening in 3 months, and he'll send him an official invitation again. Lord Millard says it's fine and asks Ezra to leave. Areum watches them in amazement, wondering how a priest and a vampire are so close. Ezra asks if he can talk to Areum for a minute, but Lord Millard quickly says no and insists he leaves immediately. Areum is surprised by Lord Millard's sudden outburst, but Ezra keeps smiling. He says it's a shame they can't talk more today. Areum stands up and tells him it's okay, and she walks him to the door. Ezra says goodbye to Lord Millard, who doesn't respond. Then he turns to Areum and offers his help again if she ever needs it. As he walks away, Areum wonders if he knows something about her. Inside, Lord Millard angrily asks her why she's still there and tells her to join him in folding origami. But she is too distracted by Ezra to hear him. Lord Millard raises his voice and calls out to her again, snapping her back to reality. She quickly tries to come up with an excuse, wondering if he's mad about her wanting to go with the priest. She puts her hands together and begs him for forgiveness, saying Ezra was just so beautiful that she wanted to see him again. Lord Millard shoots her a glare, and she figures that was the wrong thing to say. Areum quickly backtracks, saying Ezra was kind to her, and she must have lost her mind. She insists that she never wanted him to be her master, but Lord Millard doesn't look convinced. Thinking fast, she tells him that she knows how to make other origami shapes and that he's the only person she wants to fold origami with, not Ezra. They exchange awkward looks, and finally, Lord Millard asks her to close the door and sit down. Areum sighs in relief and thanks him. They start folding paper cranes together. After a bit, she hesitantly asks why Ezra calls him elder. Lord Millard's expression turns angry, and he points out that she was still thinking about the priest. Areum realizes she might have messed up again. She hurriedly explains that she thinks it's strange since he looks so young, and she thought they were related because they have the same last name. Lord Millard explains that they are related by blood, but he's at least 16 or 17 generations older than Ezra, so there's really no other way Ezra can address him. As Areum folds more origami, she wonders just how old Lord Millard really is. She starts thinking about her old home and how much time has passed since she supposedly died. She figures that if she vanished without leaving a body, it would be difficult to go back. Likewise, she decides it's better here in this world because at least she is alive. It's been a month since Areum started working at the mansion, and she's starting to feel comfortable in her role. Lord Millard bothers her less these days, which makes her job easier. One night, she's peacefully enjoying her sleep when Lady Solene shakes her awake. Areum sits up groggily, asking what's going on, but the older woman ignores her question and urges her to get up right away, acting all serious. Areum hurriedly puts on her clothes and follows her out. They walk through the dark hallways with Solene holding up a lamp to light their way. Areum wonders what kind of late-night task is in store for her at this odd hour of the day. As they walk, Solene tells her that Lord Millard is in his office, and he needs to be escorted to his bedroom. She warns Areum to be careful with him, because he is a bit sensitive at the moment. When they get to the front of the office, Solene turns to Areum, looking at her dead in the eye, and she notifies her that there's a corpse inside the room. She adds that Areum should not act surprised in there. Areum receives the news with fear, and she dreads the sight awaiting her. She accepts the lamp from Solene, bracing herself as they knock on the door. Lord Millard's voice comes from inside, granting them permission to come in. Solene gives Areum a reassuring nod, and Areum opens the door. The moment she steps inside, a strong smell hits her. It's the smell of blood, and she sees Lord Millard covered in it, holding a sword. He turns to look at her with a cold, piercing gaze, and Areum fakes a smile, trying to appear calm. She dutifully asks him if he is all right as she shakes in her shoes, inwardly reminding herself not to look down at the horror in the room. Lord Millard tosses his sword aside and strides over to her. He tells her that her words and actions never really match up, and Areum instinctively shrinks back a little. He asks her to stop pretending, claiming he can see that she's afraid. As the smell of blood makes her eyes water, Areum covers her nose. Lord Millard asks her why she came and if Lady Selene put her up to the task. Areum, not wanting to think about the body on the floor, tells him that she's there to take him to his bedroom so he can clean up. Once they're in his room, Areum starts to clean the blood now that his shirt is taken off. She plasters a fake smile on her face and asks if he's hurt, and he assures her he's not. She tells him she had figured as much because she believes he is strong. But then, her curiosity gets the best of her, and she asks what happened. She notices him glaring at her, and in reply, Lord Millard asks her how she's okay with everything and unafraid. Areum answers that she is scared because she has never seen anyone unalived before. Lord Millard chastises her for being foolish, saying she doesn't truly understand who she's working for. Cluelessly, Areum replies that she works for him, and a moment later she realizes how naive she sounds when she understands his earlier words. She quickly corrects herself, saying she's afraid of him because maids are supposed to be afraid of their masters. She adds that he can dismiss her at any time, but that doesn't mean she'll always be afraid of him. With a tentative smile, she says that sometimes she's scared and sometimes she isn't. Inwardly, she wonders if she's saying the right thing, and Lord Millard looks like he's had enough. He tells Areum that she needs to learn to be more careful, and she promises to focus on serving him well. He adds that she shouldn't pretend to be okay with everything, and Areum simply replies that she needs him. He admits that she's bound to need him, given the color of her hair. Once again, Areum asks what happened, but Lord Millard ignores the question, telling her to focus on cleaning him up. She awkwardly glances at him, unsure of how to wipe his face without making things worse. As if reading her mind, Lord Millard surprises her by grabbing her waist and lifting her onto the bed beside him. He casually tells her that it would make it easier for her to clean his face. As Areum kneels next to him on the bed, wiping the blood off his face, he explains that a burglar broke into his office and attacked him. Hence, he had to fight back. He adds that it often happens, and Areum's eyes widen in surprise. She's shocked that such dangerous situations are normal for him, and she secretly feels sorry for him. One day, as Areum is working with Lord Millard in his office, she continues to make plenty of mistakes until he tells her to stop. He asks her what the matter is, and she mentions that she heard that the priest will be visiting today. She asks if she can talk to him about her hometown. Lord Millard, in return, asks her if she's truly interested, and she says yes because her hometown is far away. He tells her to bow her head, and when she does, he removes her coif, saying it's too suffocating. He smiles triumphantly at the look on her face, and he grants her permission to see Ezra, the priest. In the hallway, Lady Selene announces that Areum won't have to wear the coif anymore, as per Lord Millard's orders. The other maids look at her with disdain. Areum goes about her duties, feeling downcast. She overhears the other maids gossiping about her. Some say they have always hated her before, but now her black hair makes her look even more repulsive. At the chapel, a maid named Tara rushes to Priest Ezra at the altar, telling him that another vampire has appeared. He looks confused for a moment until he spots Areum in the back pew without her coif. Ezra reassures Tara, saying Areum is not a vampire. Tearfully, Tara tells him he's mean for not believing her. Ezra swears on Saul's name that Areum is innocent. He says he'd resolve the matter as Saul's servant because people find it difficult to believe something they cannot see. He approaches Areum slowly, and the other worshippers watch silently. Holding his staff, he leans forward and taps her forehead. A bright yellow symbol appears, and Areum feels warm as her heart races. She's at peace because of Ezra's kindness, and he presents her to the worshippers, announcing that the symbol on her forehead proves that she is not a vampire. Areum feels happy that Ezra believes in her. After giving his sermon for the day, Ezra and Areum sit down to talk. Ezra tells Areum that he sees the world as a mix of light and darkness, as everything in creation has both. He explains that if something has only light, it is soul. Anything that has only darkness is a vampire. Everything else has some combination of both, except for Areum, who he worries is an empty shell with neither light nor darkness. He asks her where she comes from. On her way back to Lord Millard's office, Areum thinks about her chat with Ezra, wondering if she answered him right. She remembers telling him that she was born and raised in a place called Korea, and when she got here, people mistook her for a vampire and sold her as a slave. She had then thanked him for being kind and clearing up the confusion about her being a vampire. When Areum gets back to Lord Millard's office, he frowns at her and asks what she did with the priest. She's confused because he's asking about their actions, not their conversation. She excitedly tells him that Ezra wrapped light around his thumb and pressed it to her forehead, which makes Lord Millard angry. He calls Areum forward, bites his thumb, and presses it to her forehead too. A light glows there, leaving her puzzled. Lord Millard asks her to clean the blood off her head. As she turns to leave, he scowls again and questions himself, feeling foolish for getting worked up and drawing blood over something that is trivial. When she comes back, Areum asks why he's looking at her that way, but he's still lost in thought. He feels pathetic about being possessive and tells her it's nothing before calling her over again. He hands her a book called Research on Blood Collection. It gives off an ominous vibe, and she asks what it's about. Lord Millard explains it's a banned book, and anyone caught with it could have their whole household burned and their property taken away. He tells Areum to keep the book, but she interrupts, saying it's dangerous, and asks why he's giving it to her. She looks at it nervously. Lord Millard has a flashback about the night he was attacked by a burglar. A man covered in blood kneels before him, and he points his sword at him, asking if the man wishes to live. He instructs the man to bring something to use against whoever ordered the hit, and warns that if he can't, he'll end up unalived like his other brethren. Back in the present, Lord Millard looks away, and Areum asks again why he's giving her the book. He answers that it's about vampires and says that's the reason he's giving her. Areum suggests they get rid of it because it is dangerous and it is essential to keep everyone in the mansion safe. Lord Millard looks away, telling her to do what she wants because it's not his book anyway. That day, she throws the book into the fireplace and it vanishes as it burns. Later that night, Logan visits Lord Millard in his room and tells him that Count Franagor has unalived himself. He explains that a burglar broke into the Count's house and stole something, likely a banned book. To protect his family, Count Franagor unalived himself and mentioned Lord Millard in a note. The next day, Lord Millard and Areum ride in his carriage. She thanks him for buying her a coat, but he doesn't respond and looks away, a response she has grown used to by now. Even though Areum is heading to a stranger's funeral, she feels happy to finally be out of the house. She looks longingly at the curtains, wishing she could see outside. As if reading her mind, Lord Millard tells her she can open one side of the curtain since it's stuffy in the carriage. Areum quickly pulls back the curtain, excited to see outside, but she's greeted by an unexpected sight. As they pass, some people look at the carriage with fear and anger, while others have expressions of disgust and hatred. Areum is shocked by some of their glares, and she wonders if Lord Millard knew it would be like that outside. When they arrive at Count Fraganori's home, Lord Millard expresses his condolences to the Count's son, who instantly questions why he came. The son orders him to leave immediately. In response, Millard simply says he came to share the news that the banned book is gone. The Count's son gets angry and tells Millard he should have told him sooner, then his father might still be alive. He clutches his chest in pain, tears streaming down his face, and swears he'll never forgive Lord Millard. Areum feels pity for the boy as they walk away. Back in the carriage, she quickly shuts the curtains without being told. On their way back, the carriage makes a stop at a jewelry store. When they get inside, a man greets them, surprised to see Lord Millard in person. Millard heads off to take care of business and tells Areum to stay in the waiting area. A lady approaches her carrying some snacks. She says she's heard all about Areum since she's the new maid that Lord Millard takes with him everywhere. Areum asks if Lord Millard manages the store, and the lady confirms he does. She then asks Areum to share some details about her life in the mansion so she can show off to others. She offers her a cookie. Areum thinks this is her chance to help improve Lord Millard's image while snagging a cookie. She tells the lady that Lord Millard is nice to her and only gives her important tasks. The lady asks for more details, but Areum insists that she has to say nice things about Lord Millard. Later, back at the castle, Areum thinks she should have been more cautious. As she resumes her duties, Solène asks her to fetch some eggs from a maid at the side door, so Areum goes to do that. When she gets to the side door, she peeks out but doesn't see anyone, so she steps outside, shivering in the chilly wind. Suddenly, someone sneaks up behind her, covers her mouth, and takes her away. It's nighttime when Areum blinks her eyes open. She looks around and sees that she's in a place she doesn't recognize. Confused, she gazes out the window and realizes she's in the woods. The trees are tall and dark, and she feels a bit uneasy. Suddenly, she hears someone speaking to her, noticing that she is awake. She turns to see a blond guy sitting comfortably and watching her. With a big smile on his face, he introduces himself as Urian Eckmiller, and the name sounds strangely familiar. Then, it hits her. Lord Millard had made her count that name 1,068 times from some old book. A wave of dread washes over her as she connects the dots. Urian is from the imperial family. Areum feels a mix of confusion and fear as she looks at Urian and asks him where she is and why he brought her there. Inwardly, she's reminding herself to keep it together and to look for something she could use to defend herself if she needs to. Urian tries to calm her down by assuring her that she doesn't have to worry because he'll make sure she gets back home safely, but only after they finish their conversation. He urges her not to be scared and invites her to come sit at the table with him. Areum replies that she can't sit down and insists that he should stop being so polite because she doesn't deserve to sit across from him. Urian tells her that he actually brought her here to ask for a favor, which is why he thinks it's only appropriate to be courteous. Then he asks her if his look makes her uncomfortable. Areum thinks to herself that he's just too much with his flashy sparkles and overwhelming presence. Urian, noticing her discomfort, calls over one of his attendants. He stares at the man coldly and asks him why Areum looks so scared. Furthermore, he goes on to tell the attendant that he was supposed to be careful and respectful while bringing Areum and to make sure she felt at ease. He points out a small scratch on her face, showing he's not pleased. In a shocking move, he stands up and pours hot tea all over the attendant's head as punishment. Areum watches in absolute shock, horrified by what she's witnessing. Urian announces that it is his fault for not keeping his servants in check, and he turns to Areum, asking for her forgiveness. However, she's too scared to answer, and she just shivers, wondering if Urian has completely lost his mind. Taking her silence as a rejection of his apology, he tells his other attendants that the punishment given to the first man isn't enough. He orders them to take the man away and starts instructing them to deal out a more severe punishment when Areum suddenly interrupts him, insisting that the punishment is enough and that she's okay. Urian's demeanor shifts and he smirks, clearly pleased with her response. He gives her a dazzling smile and thanks her for accepting his apology, and it makes Areum even more uncomfortable. He tells her to sit down, and she does. Then he asks Areum if she knows about the decree, and she says she does. Thereafter, he asks her if she's aware of a flaw in the system. Apparently, only a select few can approach Lord Millard, which means the person who is meant to be his partner might not even be in that group. He says it's tragic because the fated lady might miss her chance to be with Lord Millard since she would be too tired from her job to make herself look nice or even go see him. Areum starts to feel suspicious, wondering what exactly he's trying to imply. Urian hands her an envelope and tells her that he wants to sponsor her. When she opens the envelope, she sees that it contains money equivalent to 130,000 pieces of gold, the exact amount that she was sold for. Panic washes over her, and she grips her dress tightly, realizing this can't just be a coincidence. Prince Urian tells her that this is his first investment, and all she has to do is promise to become Lord Millard's partner. He offers her a total of 260,000 pieces of gold and an extra 100,000 every month if she agrees. He looks at her with an expectant smile, clearly waiting for her to respond. Back at the mansion, Lord Millard gets furious and throws a knife at Solène, barely missing as it nicks her ear and draws some blood. He's fuming at her calm demeanor and demands an explanation for Areum's disappearance. Solène tells him that Prince Urian wanted to meet with the girl, so she connected them. In disbelief, Lord Millard asks how she could have done such a thing without asking him first. Solène confidently notifies him that she's been doing this for a while. It infuriates Millard, and he stands up demanding to know where Areum is. Solène responds that she's at the Torvino cabin. When he tries to walk past her, Solène asks him if he's planning to go see Areum, and if he doesn't want to know what choice she will make. Her question stops him in his tracks, and he turns around to look at her, curiosity mixed with anger. Solène tells Millard that he'll find out what Areum decides if he's patient just a little longer. Millard, still furious, points a knife at her throat, warning her not to get smart with him. In a calm but firm tone, Solène reassures him that Prince Urien would send Areum back safely, so he really doesn't need to worry. Millard angrily replies that it's expected. He tells Solène that if Urien hurts anything that belongs to him, he would make sure to pay him back in kind, matching the harm done. He grips Areum's shoe in his hand, feeling a mix of emotions. Then he tells Solent to get out, and she bows her way out. As he sits there, he can't help but think about how Areum seems to care a lot about appearances. He's convinced that if the second prince puts his mind to it and seduces her, she would fall for him hands down. He is sure that Areum would prefer to be with her kind instead of a vampire. Furthermore, he starts to wonder if he should go after her and slip her shoe back on for her, imagining the smile that would light up her face. Then he squeezes her shoe tightly in his hand when he thinks about what might be happening between Areum and that man, Urien. Then he recalls Solène's question from earlier. She had asked him if he really didn't want to know what Areum would choose, and the doubt creeps back in, nagging at him. The drama is just getting started. Want us to continue? Comment Areum below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao!